You weren't leadership material anyway. I just did what needed to be done. Those words didn't come from an enemy. They came from someone I trusted, someone I mentored. They came from Daniel. I can still hear the way he said it, casually, like it was a harmless truth, not the final stab after weeks of betrayal. The worst part. He was smiling when he said it. My name is Camille, and I used to think playing by the rules would be enough. I thought hard work, consistency, and loyalty were the currencies that mattered in corporate life. I learned the hard way. Those things are only valuable if someone's watching. And in my case, someone was. Daniel. We started in the same department 5 years ago. Fresh-faced analysts with matching cubicles and a shared dream to climb the ranks. He was charismatic, well-spoken, and always quick to make people laugh. Me. I was the quiet one. The one who stayed late, took the notes, remembered deadlines, and fixed problems before they ever hit the boss's desk. He called me his brain. I thought it was a compliment. But behind the charm, Daniel had ambition laced with venom. And I never saw it coming. The company had been restructuring and our team was being eyed for downsizing. The executives announced a new position. Head of strategy. A lifeline. A promotion that meant job security, better pay, and a seat at the table. I had led the last 3 major projects, carried the entire department during the merger crisis, and had glowing reviews from every director. Everyone said the job was mine. So I wasn't surprised when HR scheduled me for a final interview. But I was confused when Daniel got called in right after. He hadn't led a single initiative in months. He barely showed up on time. And yet 2 days later they announced him as the new head of strategy. I didn't understand. I felt numb clapping for him at the team meeting, watching him give a smug acceptance speech filled with buzzwords and half-truths. It wasn't until a week later that I found out what really happened. He had gone to leadership with a fabricated story, that I'd been mishandling accounts, pushing deadlines, even misreporting numbers. He backed it up with emails he doctored, files I supposedly misplaced, and subtle whispers he planted with just enough plausibility. He didn't just take the promotion. He buried me to get it. At first I kept hoping the truth would come out. I thought anyone would question how the person who held the team together for 3 years could suddenly be so incompetent. But no one did. Not even HR. Not my manager. Not the coworkers I helped cover for when they missed targets. No one wanted to look too closely. Daniel was shiny, confident, easy to sell to upper management. Me. I was the quiet one. The convenient one to blame. They moved me to a lower department, temporary reassignment, they said. But it was punishment, plain and simple. No more strategic meetings. No more leadership training. No more future. It was humiliating. I remember staring at my new desk, a wobbly table near the office supply closet, while Daniel's nameplate was being installed upstairs. I sat there for hours after everyone had left, just trying to breathe. I had worked so hard for what? I thought about quitting. Walking away. I even typed a resignation letter. But then I remembered the way he smiled when he lied to me. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to walk away. Not because I had something to prove to them, but because I had something to prove to myself. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. It was going to be the beginning of his downfall. And my rise. They say rock bottom is a place you visit, not a place you stay. But no one tells you how heavy it feels when you first land there. 4 weeks after the demotion, I floated through the office like a ghost. People stopped making eye contact. Conversations would halt when I entered a room. The same people who used to call me for guidance now avoided me like I was contagious. Daniel. He barely acknowledged me. The only time I saw his smug face was during the all-hands meetings, where he flaunted ideas I had planted during late nights and unpaid overtime, ideas he now repackaged as his vision. It hurt. Deeply. Not just the betrayal, but the silence. The abandonment. The realization that I had overestimated everyone around me, and underestimated myself. But here's the thing about being pushed to the bottom. There's no one beneath you. That means the only direction left to go is up. So I started building, in the dark. I came in early and left late. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed to. It was the only way to survive the noise in my head. I studied everything. Company financials, competitors, internal systems, even leadership psychology. I used every spare minute to sharpen the skills I had put on hold while propping up everyone else. I signed up for weekend seminars, took online certifications, networked outside the company, and quietly, without saying a word, I started to reinvent myself. I became a student of corporate patterns. Daniel's patterns. I paid attention to his habits, how he handled clients, how he led meetings, how he treated his team. And I noticed cracks. His confidence wasn't backed by substance. He relied on buzzwords, flattered the right people, and ignored the details. Eventually, the people working under him started showing signs of burnout and confusion. Turnover increased. Deadlines slipped. But no one questioned him. Yet. One day, I got called into a project review meeting. I assumed it was a mistake. When I walked in, I saw Daniel sitting at the head of the table, fidgeting with his pen. He gave me a thin smile. "Camille, since you handled the back end on this project before, thought you might have some insights." Before. He meant when I ran the department that he now barely kept afloat. I sat down, my pulse steady. "Sure," I said, flipping through the report he had presented. "Looks like the client requested a brand realignment. But the pitch deck sent last week didn't reflect that. That might be why they're stalling." He looked surprised, then annoyed. "You weren't in the last call. How do you know?" I looked at him calmly. "I read the notes. And I actually followed up with the client last week when I saw the gap." There was a pause. Someone from the marketing team murmured, "That would explain the delay." I saw it, the flicker in his eyes. He hated that I still knew more than he did. After the meeting, my inbox pinged. From the subject, "Let's talk." That one email changed everything. The COO had noticed the steady decline in Daniel's department and wanted an outside perspective. I gave her one. Calmly. Factually. With receipts. I didn't throw Daniel under the bus, but I didn't shield him either. I presented data, trends, and alternatives. 2 weeks later, I was assigned to assist on a special task force, directly under the executive team. Daniel's face when he saw the announcement email? Priceless. Of course, he tried to play it off. Said he was glad to have my support. Told others I was just an analyst again. But I didn't care. I wasn't in it for revenge, not yet. I was building credibility. And my work began to speak louder than his titles. While he was out golfing with vendors and reposting leadership quotes on LinkedIn, I was restructuring broken workflows, fixing client relationships, and delivering actual results. The executive team noticed. They always do, eventually. But even success comes with pressure. I was still healing from what happened. Nights were hard. I'd lie in bed thinking of all the what-ifs. Wondering why no one had stood up for me. Wondering why I let it happen. I'd replay Daniel's voice in my head, that smug tone when he said I wasn't leadership material. Sometimes I believed it. But the difference now was, I didn't let that belief stop me. Not anymore. I realized I didn't need validation from a title, or applause from the same people who ignored my downfall. I didn't even need Daniel to acknowledge what he did. I just needed to win on my own terms. And slowly I started doing just that. I got pulled into more meetings. My name started showing up on proposal credits again. And in one surreal moment, the COO asked me to represent the company at a regional summit in Chicago. Guess who had begged for that opportunity last year? Not me. But I was the one who got it. Because I had stopped trying to be seen, and started acting like someone who didn't need to be. That was the moment I knew, the fall wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a much louder rise. And Daniel? He was just the stepping stone I needed to reach higher than he ever imagined. Success is quiet at first. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or fireworks. It sneaks in like morning light, soft, persistent, impossible to ignore. And for me, that light came with a new office keycard and an invitation to lead a presentation Daniel had been prepping for weeks. It wasn't a mistake. The COO had reviewed both our decks. Mine had better numbers, clearer goals, a strategy that actually understood the client's needs. Daniel's was, as always, style without substance. So they picked mine. And suddenly, The same man who once stood in front of the company and claimed my ideas as his own now had to sit in the third row while I spoke with confidence to a room full of executives, including the board. I didn't fumble. I didn't rush. I walked them through the data, the projections, the roadmap. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause. I caught Daniel's expression just before he forced his hands together. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Because he knew what was coming. And this time he couldn't stop it. After that meeting, things escalated quickly. I started getting emails directly from senior leaders. My name began circulating in leadership chats. I got pulled into strategy calls that Daniel wasn't even invited to. One day I was asked to mentor 2 junior managers. I recognized the names. They were the same women Daniel used to interrupt in meetings, the same ones he once dismissed as not aggressive enough. Now they were reporting to me. And Daniel? He started making mistakes. Big ones. He missed a client deadline. Blamed the team. Sent an internal memo that got leaked and misunderstood, which set off a PR mess that took days to clean up. The irony? I was asked to step in and fix it. And I did. Quietly. Efficiently. I wasn't just a solution. I was becoming the standard. But I never gloated. I never threw his name under the bus. Because the most devastating revenge isn't loud. It's undeniable. The tension between us became impossible to ignore. He started avoiding eye contact again. If I walked into a room, he'd find an excuse to leave. One afternoon, I overheard him arguing on the phone in a conference room, voice sharp and cracking. I don't know what else they want from me. I've done everything right. But he hadn't. Not really. He had only done everything to look right. That's a very different thing. People started noticing. Whispers swirled. Conversations paused when I passed. And not because I was being pitted, but because I was being watched. Respected. Even feared a little. The shift was happening and it was irreversible. Then came the final crack. A quarterly review was scheduled. Daniel was expected to present. The board had concerns and they wanted solutions. He asked to lead it, probably hoping it would redeem him. I had no objection. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The day came. The room was full. Charts. Data. Slides. And within the first 5 minutes he fell apart. He misquoted a figure. Fumbled the client metrics. Overpromised revenue. One board member raised her hand and calmly asked, "Wasn't this corrected in Camille's earlier report?" The room turned to me. I nodded. Yes. The updated figures were in the report I submitted last week. Slide 12. The screen switched. My slides. My name in the footer. My accuracy. Daniel's face drained of color. After the meeting, I was asked to stay back. The board chair looked at me with a measured smile. "You've shown remarkable clarity and resilience, Camille. We've been watching. And we'd like to talk next steps." Those 2 words, next steps, felt like justice wrapped in gold. I didn't say much. I just nodded. That evening, as I packed my bag to leave, Daniel appeared at my door. He looked tired. Smaller. Like the weight of everything he tried to fake had finally collapsed on him. "I know you probably hate me," he said. I looked up slowly. "I don't hate you. You were necessary." He frowned. "Necessary?" I stood. Sometimes, life sends us people to show us who we don't want to be. And sometimes those people clear the path we were too polite to claim. You helped me see that I was never the problem. He didn't respond. He just stood there, lost, silent, defeated. I left him there. Because closure wasn't a conversation. It was a choice. And I had already made mine. They say the higher you climb, the harder you fall. But what they never tell you is what it feels like to watch someone fall from the place they stole from you. It's not joy. Not exactly. It's not vengeance either. It's clarity. Peaceful. Piercing. Pure. That's what I felt when the company's internal memo went out. The subject line was simple. Organizational restructuring. Effective immediately. Daniel's name was nowhere in it. But everyone knew. He was gone. Just like that. No farewell lunch. No send-off email. No redemption arc. The man who once sat at the table I wasn't allowed to speak at had vanished. stripped of his title, his power, and most painfully, his illusion. I didn't ask for details, but I heard whispers. Apparently his numbers were inflated. He'd manipulated figures, passed off old campaign reports as new ones. It wasn't just laziness, it was dishonesty. The final straw? A client threatened to terminate their contract after Daniel sent them outdated projections. When asked to explain, he tried to pin it on me. Only this time, no one believed him. Because this time I had a track record that spoke louder than his excuses. And just like that, the house of cards collapsed. But my rise didn't come from Daniel's fall. It came from the ashes of what he tried to burn. What I rebuilt, through sleepless nights, resilience, and a refusal to shrink. The board offered me the director of strategy position. Permanent. It was more than a promotion, it was a full circle. I sat at that same glass conference table where he once silenced me, only now I was leading the meeting. And it wasn't just the title that had changed, it was the way people looked at me. They listened when I spoke. They asked for my input. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the light. But success didn't erase the scars. There were nights I still heard Daniel's voice in my head, repeating that I wasn't cutthroat enough, that I'd never be leadership material, that I should be grateful to be in the room. That kind of gaslighting doesn't go away easily, especially when it's wrapped in charisma and whispered over coffee like advice. I'd been conditioned to doubt myself, to second-guess my wins, to shrink my worth for the comfort of a man who couldn't bear to be outshined. But now, I was learning to believe the truth. I was never the problem. I was just too powerful for the box he tried to keep me in. A few weeks later I ran into him. Not in the office, of course, but at a networking event downtown. He wasn't on the guest list. Someone had brought him as a +1. I noticed him from across the room, standing awkwardly by the bar, surrounded by people who no longer recognized his name. He spotted me. He walked over slowly, like someone approaching a ghost from their past. "Camille," he said, forcing a smile. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled politely. "Really? You didn't think I'd be where all the decision-makers are?" He cleared his throat. "Congrats on the new role. I saw the announcement. Big move." "Thank you. It's been overdue." He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe explain himself. Maybe apologize. But I didn't give him the space. Because I didn't need it. I was no longer looking for closure from the person who broke me. I had built my closure. In the form of a career he couldn't touch and a name he could no longer use as a footnote in his narrative. Later that night I gave the keynote speech. I stood on stage under warm lights, wearing a sleek black blazer and heels that clicked with every step, every symbol of the woman I had fought to become. I didn't mention him. I didn't have to. I spoke about resilience. About silence being a battlefield and grace being a weapon. About how women don't have to become cruel to be powerful. We just have to stop apologizing for our presence. The applause thundered through the room. And for the first time I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was just existing. Unapologetically. And that was enough. You never forget the moment you walk into a room and realize the power is finally yours. Not borrowed. Not handed to you as a pity prize. Yours. That was the feeling I had 6 months into my new role. Sitting at the head of the boardroom table, briefing executives on quarterly growth I spearheaded. Initiatives they once said were too ambitious when Daniel shot them down. But now, those ideas were turning into revenue. My strategies were being studied, not stolen. My voice wasn't just heard, it was quoted. Funny how people start to listen when they realize you were right all along. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming space. Rewriting the version of me they once believed was too soft, too careful, too emotional to lead. Because what they didn't understand was, those very traits were my strength. My empathy wasn't a weakness. It helped me build trust with clients. My caution wasn't fear. It was strategy. I wasn't loud in meetings because I was too busy preparing answers no one else had even thought to ask. And now, the same men who once overlooked me were leaning forward, scribbling notes as I spoke. The old me would have shrunk in those moments. Thought maybe I was just lucky. Maybe this wouldn't last. But the woman I had become, the one molded in the fire of sabotage and silence. She knew better. I had earned every inch of this. But just when I thought the past was done with me, it reared its head again. Only this time it came with an opportunity. I got a message from a talent agency, one of the biggest PR firms in the country. They wanted to feature me in their annual Powerhouse Women in Business campaign. Full spread. Cover story. I froze when I saw the email. Because the firm? It was one Daniel had always dreamed of working with. He'd applied there twice in the past and got rejected both times. And now, they were calling me. I accepted the invitation, but not out of spite. I accepted because I was finally ready to stop hiding my story. To tell the truth, not just about what was done to me, but about how I survived it. The photo shoot was surreal. Lights, cameras, stylists fussing over details. But the moment that truly made my heart clench was when I stood in front of that camera and they asked, "What do you want to say to women who've been silenced?" I looked into the lens and said, "Your silence doesn't make you small. It makes you observant. And when it's time to speak, they'll have no choice but to listen." The issue dropped 2 weeks later. I didn't rush to read it. I didn't need validation. But it found its way everywhere. LinkedIn, group chats, even the break room in my old department. And with it came messages. From old coworkers who said, "I always knew you had it in you." From women who whispered, "Thank you for speaking up." And from Daniel. I hesitated when I saw his name on the screen. I hadn't blocked him, but we hadn't spoken in nearly a year. I debated deleting the message. But curiosity won. "Congrats on the feature. I hope you're doing well." Just that. Pulled. Short. Useless. I didn't reply. What was there to say? He watched me bloom after trying to bury me. That was enough. But life has a poetic way of driving the message home. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak at an industry roundtable in DC. One of the sponsors was a startup accelerator. And guess who was on the list of applicants? Daniel. The man who once told me I didn't have the edge for leadership was now pitching to a board I sat on. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy trying to impress the room. But when I walked in and took my seat next to the committee chair, his face drained of color. He stumbled over his words during the Q&A. Couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was reality. The woman he left behind in the shadows had become the gatekeeper to the opportunities he once hoarded. And no, his project wasn't selected. Not because of me. Because it lacked vision. Just like he always did. Later, I walked past him as I exited the event. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize. Maybe to beg. I didn't stop. My silence said everything. There's a strange stillness that comes with peace. Not the kind you beg for when you're crying yourself to sleep or the one you fake through forced smiles. But real peace. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that simply is. That's what I felt when I stood at the glass wall of my office. My office. Overlooking the city I once walked through with a bowed head and silent grief. Now the same streets whispered a different story. One of survival. One of strength. One of a woman who refused to stay buried. I thought about everything that had led me here. The humiliation. The credit stolen. The nights I stared at my ceiling, asking why the people I trusted most had turned against me. The months I spent rebuilding my confidence one broken piece at a time. And the moment I chose to rise, not with vengeance but with purpose. Because at some point you realize, revenge isn't about making them hurt. It's about making yourself whole again. And I was whole now. Stronger. Sharper. More dangerous in the best way. After Daniel's fall from grace, things shifted fast. My consulting firm, built from scratch in a one-bedroom apartment with a vision board taped to the fridge, had become one of the most sought after in the city. We specialized in corporate recovery, brand identity, and female-led innovation. And guess what? We delivered. Every time. Companies that once rejected my resume now requested meetings. Former colleagues reached out for mentorship. And as for my team, a powerhouse of brilliant minds. Many of them women who, like me, had been overlooked, underestimated, or downright dismissed in their previous roles. We were changing the rules. And rewriting the ending. That month, Forbes reached out again. They wanted to do a follow-up feature. This time not just on me but on the movement I had inspired. They titled it, From Shadow to Spotlight, The Rise of Women Who Won't Be Silenced. I didn't cry when I read it. I smiled. Because this was what I fought for. Not just vindication but impact. And yet life had one more poetic twist waiting for me. I was at a charity gala hosted by one of the major business networks. I was seated at the table of honor, rubbing shoulders with CEOs and city officials, when I noticed him across the room. Daniel. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Like the weight of all his burned bridges finally settled on his shoulders. He wasn't alone. He was speaking with a mid-tier firm I'd heard was struggling financially. The spark in his eyes? Gone. His smile? Forced. He didn't notice me. Or maybe he did but couldn't bring himself to approach. Later that evening I stepped into the corridor to take a call. When I turned to go back in he was standing there, waiting. I almost didn't come tonight, he said softly. I nodded. But you did. He looked down. You look unstoppable. It wasn't a compliment. It was a confession. I let the silence stretch before I responded. And you look exactly like the man who told me I didn't belong in the room. His eyes met mine. Tired. Regretful. I was wrong. I know. I never should have taken what was yours. I shrugged. But you did. And I'm still here. He hesitated like he wanted to say more. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to explain. But I didn't give him the space. I didn't need closure. Not from him. I had given myself that long ago. I walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the final sentence of a chapter I'd already finished writing. Outside the air was cool. The city lights blinked like stars grounded on earth. And as I stood beneath them, I thought of every woman still fighting to be seen. Still sitting in meetings where their ideas are stolen. Still wondering if their worth is invisible because no one has said it out loud. To them I say this. You are not invisible. You are becoming. Let them sleep on you. Let them doubt you. Let them call you deadweight. And then let them watch as you soar so high they can't even reach your shadow. Because the best revenge is being everything they said you couldn't be. And more. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button. It lets us know you're watching and feeling every word. Leave a comment and tell us what part hit home the most. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that pain doesn't get the final word. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Because every day, we're bringing you stories of strength, survival, and the sweet taste of karma. You don't want to miss what's coming next.